Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaber.io, and I'm here today with Justin Swibel, the CEO of Colorful Realm. Good afternoon in your case, Justin. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I noticed we had some pretty bad weather over in your part of the world recently. Has that gone through?
Yeah, I prefer the change of season. Sort of
Ah,
keeps you humble.
yes.
So yeah, it's pleasant enough. It's
Yeah. Well, I
brisk.
know Sunday was rainy and windy there, correct?
Hmm.
Yes. I have family members there, so they were telling me how bad it was, and I didn't tell them what it was like here in San Francisco. So to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yes, I grew up in the northern suburbs of Chicago,
Hmm.
in Highland Park, Illinois, and I spent a lot of time there, um, interested in movies, watching lots of movies from the library,
Hmm.
and there's not a lot to do in the suburbs besides go to the mall and
Mm-hmm.
watch movies. At least that's what I found. So I ended up developing an interest in making movies, and I went to NYU Film School
Hmm.
at Tisch School of the Arts, and studied the Greek classics there,
Hmm.
and also made some films.
Mm-hmm.
And after school, sort of riding the wave of some success related to a short film I made,
Hmm.
um, I started a production company
Hmm.
with an NYU colleague, and we developed several intellectual properties. We optioned a book, and we at last we made our feature film debut, which was my directorial debut, and that had limited runs in New York and Los Angeles, and was sort of a spoof um, on the art film.
Hmm.
And I then started to work on developing a second feature, and sort of discovered that I wasn't exactly comfortable with the low budget range for what I wanted to do with respect to reaching a wide audience. I learned about sales agents and the role they play, and the way you can rationalize a spend. And so I moved to Chicago for a year to regroup
Mm-hmm.
and to write a screenplay that I thought could maybe fetch the sort of attention and funding that I found was necessary. So I did that, and I optioned a screenplay to a New York production company, and I moved to New York and began working for this company, developing this project. Um, and what I found was, after several years of re-optioning the material and taking lots of notes, that I was producing work that ultimately wasn't liked, and wasn't really so much interested in the committee style, tribunal uh,
Mm-hmm.
effect of how a piece of material is developed.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, I started just writing a couple of screenplays that nobody gave me permission, to write, and I didn't tell anybody about. And I found that I thought they could be commercially viable in a way that I hadn't really achieved before in my writing. And so I started to ask myself the hard questions, and came up with many excuses as to why I should, stop thinking about making an independent film, because I'd seen many friends, some of whom have gone on to great success, ultimately make a movie, have the movie purchased and sold for a handsome price, and then sort of flounder. And as I started to ask myself direct questions, and require that I, supply, replies that didn't sort of skip around the matter at hand, I figured that what I needed to do was ultimately develop some sort of system that would allow me to direct and produce studio level films. And essentially, 3 years later, we have a fully proceduralized plan to reinvent the mid-level movie, the $20 to $40 million movie. which is, what someone like Joe Roth sort of even considers to be extinct. But I think that in working with several Wall Street financial consultants who are seasoned Morgan Stanley, Lehman Brothers people, I discovered that a lot of my answers to their questions about how do movies work, how are investors protected, were totally laughed at by them. And I had to reassess and think about, well, how do you protect an investor, whether it's a studio or a venture capitalist? And that led me to sort of hone the financial philosophy of safeguarding and making it, on the one hand, moderated independently from the point of view of development, but at the same time, communal in terms of the greenlighting process, which is something that I think Disney does to some degree. And I sort of, figured out step-by-step processes for the development portion of things, which in Hollywood is a vortex that many people get sucked into, many very talented people. And it's because there's nothing set in stone as far as what is going to be the time schedule, what is going to be the budget, for this development period. They sort of take it as it goes. And when an executive feels that it's right and ready, that's how they do it. But to me, that's totally, it's impossible for me to pitch that to any sort of investor interested in yield, and interested in a reliable projection. So I, started to, and I'm sort of like jumping back and just covering those 3 years. I developed a system with the help of, a team that I've accrued, my board and my staff, of very seasoned people who are, successful and have been highly accomplished in the movie industry, in the entrepreneurial realm generally, in the banking sector, in the fashion sector, in the philanthropic sector. And, they asked me hard questions, but what I discovered was that there's certain parameters, which if you set for yourself, you can, figure out how do you fit in that constraint. And that sort of naturally led me to where I want to be, which is wanting to work with the best, the best personnel, and wanting to make movies that I can market with movie stars. So the sort of appeal is rather obvious. And, the thing about setting parameters is just totally like, it's not what's usually done in Hollywood until a budget is finally secured. Even then though, oftentimes the spending plan changes. And a movie that is budgeted at a $30 million range turns into a $50 million range during production. That to me is, again, not something that I can, employ if I'm using other people's money, which is necessary for this venture. So after, figuring out how we're going to do development, what are going to be the limits involved, we moved on to production and thought about, what I did when I first realized that I wanted to make studio movies, or studio level movies, which is to make a prototype of the movie, which is, again, common to Disney, to particularly Pixar, and lots of the visual effects movies that have been made for $100 million and above and are now like, garnering up to $41 billion in merchandising revenue per year. But in the mid-market range and in the drama genre, it's not really done unless it's a thriller to fully pre-visualize a movie, to have something that is prefabricated that you can show the people who are going to work on the movie.
Mhm.
that will allow you to promise a certain running time and achieve that and just deliver on time. So basically, you start, what I figured was that if I started with these abstract principles and married myself to them, I would have to figure out ways to make it work. And that's where we are now. We also have sort of similarly constrained ideas when it comes to marketing and release. There's a lot of, as we were talking about before we pressed record, there's a lot of antiquated thinking
Mhm.
that determines, how a movie is released, for example, where it seems that everybody, as you read in the trades, everybody thinks that either you have to have a movie in the theaters exclusively before you then can go to premium video on demand because you don't want to steal the business from the exhibitors, or now you can start the PVOD window earlier.
Mhm.
What's occurred to me in thinking about this recently, for example, is that I don't understand exactly why the windows have to overlap, or why movie companies seem to think that in today's day and age, people will forget about a movie, right? Or find it less appealing if it's first been in theaters. It's really that obviously they want a quick return, right? The
Mhm.
studios want to have spent a lot of money on marketing the movie and on making the movie. And so they want to quickly draw that ROI. Um, I guess I just think that if you're measured, um, you know, we can do things in a way that is more tempered and that earns better returns
Mhm.
over a more extended period of time. And again, significantly restrains the way movies are marketed,
Mhm.
which is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, experts and journalists and executives in the industry, totally out of whack with what is necessary for success in today's day and age, which entails digital marketing, social media integration,
Mhm.
and brand integration, and all of that stuff can bring costs way down,
Yeah.
and you can sort of be making revenue through partnership deals that also serve as advertising. So you're not actually having to directly spend. So Colorful Realm is the culmination of all of the ambition and desire I have to make, you know, great movies,
Mhm.
to work with great people, my heroes, and to also um, quiet the angst that I started to feel in college and film school and ever since, which is that lots of this stuff doesn't make sense. And there is no reason why the movie business can't be a safe space for private equity. And not having to require a leap of faith from a personal association,
Mhm.
or someone who is just excited about the movie business,
Mhm.
and instead just create a viable uh, plan and an attractive brand through conservative ideas.
Wow. So it
So
sounds like Colorful Realm is basically bringing discipline to the movie industry, correct? Or trying to at least.
discipline and also, uh, a little bit more of a heightened sense of responsibility to the conservation movement. We have an ESG criteria that was very easy for us to put together, because there is so much power and material used in the making of movies, and it's very easy to repurpose and to figure out ways to promote a more green sort of you know identity for a movie company. So yeah, more disciplined, I suppose, applies to that as well.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Your industry and my industries are kind of into, they're a lot different. Your office is the set, and the set can be anywhere. So it could be on set or it could be remote. But then a lot of what goes on doesn't happen on the set, right? So, I mean, what is your experience from a remote worker standpoint as it relates to the music or the film industry?
Well, we are not yet in development, but so far I've found the remote work situation to be highly beneficial for everyone involved as far as the flexibility it provides for scheduling and the accountability it promotes. There's a lot that can be lost in the group, the physical environment, and there's a lot more of that bystander effect you get, as I mentioned earlier, where you know personal responsibility is sort of like it's avoided when five people are told to do one thing, versus you being on a Zoom call. Although, let's say we're on a group call, I still think that there's less of an excuse to not do your job, and there's less to lean on in the remote work environment. It feels like there's more of like a record, and as far as the pre-production and post-production phases, there's really no need for a lot of in-person interaction and travel that is required to get to and from a facility. Sound mixing, my sound mixer, for example, that I've worked with, who works on Hollywood shows since I was in college, he eventually got a perfect room set up in his home, and he mixes from home. You don't need to have large group gatherings to develop a movie or to finish a movie. As far as the physical set element goes, even that is going to be, as we've been reading and seeing with many of the successful productions now underway, and certainly The Mandalorian, there's going to be a lot of virtual production where you're decreasing the amount of travel and labor you need by setting everything in a soundstage environment and creating either video walls or front projection or rear projection, or using green screen or blue screen to negate the need for traveling an entire company to a physical space.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I have been on a set of a movie and a TV show, and it's amazing how real they make it look in those. I mean, they're really just warehouses is what they are, right? It's always amazed me how they do that. And then you see the finished product, it's like, wow, it does look real. So what do you think is the future of remote then as it relates to the music industry? Do you think that now that we've been through COVID, do you think we're going to see more and more of this where people are saying, hey, I can save money in making a quality movie and I don't need to have everybody on set?
Yeah, I think it's going to actually instill permanent changes. There's no doubt about it. There's no need to waste everybody's time and money on meetings that don't need to take place, or, again, you're less likely to linger, on a video call than you are in person. And I think that once, we're in a post-vaccine environment, we're going to remain remote for a large degree of what we do in the preparatory and post-production procedures, because there's just no reason why anybody is going to want to sort of abandon the flexibility that you get by working at home or on the go, right?
Mm-hmm. And do you think that will have an effect on the Los Angeles area? Do you think people say, hey, we don't have to do this out of Hollywood, we can do this anywhere? Do you think there's any chance of that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, we've been reading, obviously there are certain states that have tax rebates that draw people away from shooting in California, and also in Canada, there's very attractive rebates. The question, how does remote work relate to drawing, like physical production being done? I think, it's not so much related. That's been going on for a while. There's no reason now with very high quality facilities in multiple states in the country and in other countries. There's a lot of physical production going on everywhere.
So Colorful Realm, how long have you been an entity, and how long have you, what is your goal over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we were founded in April 2019,
Mm.
and we are pre-launch, by the way.
Mhm.
And our plan is to produce a slate of 10 mid-level movies over the course of 5 years at 2 movies per year.
Mhm.
Um, and we're hoping to begin production on the first two in 20, 2022 for
Okay.
release in 2023. And again, the idea of this sort of rapid creation of an IP library um, is going to be made possible because of our proceduralized approach to the entire process of making films. And again, that was sort of the genesis. Was I wrote these 2 scripts. Now, I'm not going to be the creator of all these movies, the writer or director, but I wrote these 2 projects, and I thought, well, it would be kind of a waste to not make 2 of them at once, because you're getting all these resources and this momentum together, and why wouldn't you just make 2 at the same time? If you had a system, an assembly line sort of Irving Thalberg approach, um, you could. I mean, you can make much more depending on how much capital you're working with, but certainly uh, 2 also appealed to the investors that I encountered, because they said, yeah, we understand the idea that if one fails, that's okay, because the other one might do well.
Mhm.
And we're not going to hold it against you if to diversify and increase your odds
Mhm.
um, by making 2 that are in different genres, that attract different quadrants, is a smart way to cover yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, true. And actually, if you think about it, in the venture capital world, a 50% return rate is really good, right? If
right.
50% of all companies that are funded are successful, that they would love those ads, right?
That's
That's the
right.
trick to VCs, right? Is you know
All
to
about the app. Mhm.
yeah, and to get that one big one, to get the next Google. For
That's right.
you, it'd be to get the next Star Wars, right?
Mhm. Mhm. The whole problem with the way it's done now is that everything is always, there's too much pressure put on one movie.
Yeah.
You know, um, I mean, that relates also to the way that they nurture the investments themselves,
Mhm.
and putting so much pressure on the box office performance within 3 weeks, of
Mm.
release. But also to your point, yeah, just you know, you're looking for 1 or 2, hopefully,
Mhm.
bonanzas.
Mhm.
Um, if the rest are healthy earners on the lower scale, but when you're making a slate of 10 movies, as we will, it's likely we will have one of those, you
Mhm.
know, especially if we try to target that. But, you know, yeah, there's sense in uh, mitigating risk by virtue of increasing the volume that you
Yeah.
put out there.
Yeah. And as we know from the movie industry, something that looks good in a script doesn't always look good when it hits the screen. You
Well, the solution to that, we I think we have, which
Oh, okay.
is we're going to pre-visualize the movie. So you're going to actually see. We're going to show people in storyboard form that's cut together with voices and music. You're going to actually we'll know if it's good or not, because we can watch it in real time. Again, in my development process, this is again done in Hollywood with certain films. Certainly, all of the animation studios.
Mm.
They'll create a pencil sketch rendering of the movie, and they won't greenlight millions and millions of dollars for digital animation and paint until they can see that the movie is good and it works. Um, I spent time, about a year and a half, drawing this whole script and scanning it and cutting it together and doing the voices and music myself, and it was illuminating for me
Mhm.
because I saw where it was, problematic, where I needed to fix it. I saw that although the script was a certain length, the sequence was 20 minutes longer than I
Mm.
thought it was going to be. All that stuff is usually found out, you know, sometimes a month before release, and they have a movie that is 40 minutes longer than they thought it was going to be. and then there's like a contractual problem because the director likes the movie the way it is, and
Mhm.
then someone else comes in to cut it, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, interesting.
You want to protect the artistic integrity of the director, so the director has to know what the movie is. That's the compromise, is that he or she or they have to know what it is before we even greenlight. We're going to spend more
Mhm.
than most people do on development, but it's totally worth it because
Wow.
our development will actually create a prototype so we know exactly what we're getting into. And everybody who we make deals with knows exactly what it is. It's not a case of literary interpretation of a screenplay, because you read a screenplay and I read a screenplay, we're going to have very different points of view.
Yeah.
And there's no way to know what the movie will actually turn out to be.
Interesting. I kind of assumed that stuff was already going on with these movies because, my industry, we really do pre-plan almost any major IT project that we take on. And we don't always get it 100% right, but we're pretty close in general, right? If someone says, Here's what I need," usually we can get it right within about 10%. It's going to take this amount of time and this amount of, but a lot of that is done in the upfront, right? If you design it right from the beginning, you usually get it right at the end. Interesting. I just assumed you
Yeah,
guys
this
did
is
that.
not how it's done in general.
Wow. So it's more creative. It's more like shoot from the pants.
Well, see, in my opinion, that's not creative. That's actually irresponsible. You
Ah,
know, you can be creative in a very safe space and make all the mistakes that you need to make to discover what you should do. In a
ah,
development process, you don't need to, when you're burning, tens of thousands of dollars a minute on a physical set
yeah.
and everybody's there around you. That's when you're discovering and you're extemporaneously creating. It makes no sense.
I've
You know,
never looked at it that. You're right. So interestingly, you said you started in April of 2019. So you basically were in business for 1 year when the shutdown in place hit. Doing it, it was basically 11 months. So did that cause any hardships or challenges that you didn't expect?
outstanding ones, of course.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Basically, the colorful realm process is designed to negate the bias that
Mhm.
everybody rightfully has against entertainment and media as far as investment goes, right? And so you add on top of that, well, let's say you cut through all that noise, but then COVID hits and cinemas are closed.
Mhm.
Revenues for obviously movie going drop, and production is halted.
Mhm.
Very difficult to hold true to your original plan
Yes.
and get any sort of respect or appreciation from an investor who is you know faced with a market that is so turbulent and there's so many pockets to
Mhm.
find advantage in. And so yes, we've had to completely pivot
Mhm.
our approach and consider um, you know the outstanding success that Universal has had with Trolls World Tour, and
Mhm.
Disney to some degree with Mulan, and
Mhm.
basically say, okay, well, what if we didn't even pursue a theatrical release, and how would that work? Uh, and also, you know, what are we going to do if we launch and then COVID or something else hits and production is again halted because it's resumed?
Right.
How are we going to deal with that? Um, you know, one investor that I've spoken with has told me about in the manufacturing process of the fashion sector. Lots of companies have basically just stopped doing
Mhm.
anything because all they were supposed to do now was they were manufacturing orders, of a line, and now they can't manufacture, so the orders are canceled. So what are they going to do? You know, so it's been about reassessing how are we going to schedule ourselves, and also, you know, it's been really helpful because whenever you face these temporary setbacks,
Mhm.
you have to sort of, find new strength and understand that there's advantage to be found. Um, that is of an equal value
Mhm.
to the obstacle that you're encountering.
Mhm.
And that leads you, and that has led us to figure out how to rethink the entire process of generating returns for
Mhm.
movies. Um, because we've been halted. We were going to launch, and when risk assessment chimes in with credible alarm,
Mhm.
there's nothing more to say than, all right, let me go back to the drawing board and figure out how can we, mitigate risk so that no matter what happens, you'll be safe and protected, the investor.
Yeah.
And that has, again, opened a door that is so exciting to me from a business perspective
Mm.
about how making return on content is today, it's like a wild west of opportunity. There isn't the same limitation that
Mhm.
you had in the past when theatrical was just so important.
Mhm.
And it's not just about theatrical. When viewership returns in general were
Mhm.
so important. Now there are so many ways to integrate communities of fans
Mhm.
and make them and their purchases on things that are totally unrelated to buying the movie or buying a ticket to the movie benefit the venture.
Mhm. Well, Justin, I want to thank you for your time today. It's always fun to talk to someone who's bringing disruption to an industry, which is what you're doing. And I never really thought of that industry needing disruption, but apparently it does. And I look forward to your first two films. You said they're coming out in 2023.
We hope in the later months of 2023.
Well, I look forward to watching them, whether it be in the theater or however it's being displayed. So thank you for your time today and have a great week.
Thank you very much.
All right.